Team 1, stand by. Copy. Team 1, standing by. Breach, breach, breach.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. The content today is going to be quite a bit different than my normal content. Normally I try to tell some stories or, elaborate on things that have some kind of an impact on mental health, whether it be mine or someone else's mental health. And that or just general conversation. That's kind of the core of what happens here. But something happened yesterday, and despite everything in me not to bring this topic up, I just felt like I can't help it. I've never wanted to put my opinion on political matters or anything like that out in the social climate for obvious reasons. It can get quite confrontational, and unfortunately, because of that, it makes it very hard for people to talk openly in public about those things, especially when people become so passionate about it. So today's episode is less about storytelling, and I guess you'd say more of a rant. It's a rant basically because I'm tired of seeing what I'm seeing or hearing what I'm hearing. And unfortunately, it's around such a controversial topic of politics. And I generally reserve that for private conversations. However, I'm not alone, in my opinion. Just about any social media app, you can see some creator going online and talking about things similar to what I'll be discussing today. So I'm not alone in it, and I know that. I just generally try to steer clear of it because of how controversial it can be. So keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind that I also have a day job that I have to maintain, I'm going to do my best to not let my comments get too out of control. Like most, I can have a very passionate response to things that I experience. Generally, I keep a cool head about things, especially if it's something that's right in front of my face and causes danger or whatever. However, at this time, it affects so many people that it's hard to not be passionate about it. So I'm sure everybody's aware of what's going on right now. November, we had the election. Donald Trump has been elected for the next presidency. He's going to be taking office here in a few days. And along with that comes the nominees for the cabinet for him. And then right after his nominees are announced, that's when all the confirmation hearings start happening in the Senate. And the way I've always understood these confirmation hearings to be were they're supposed to be an interview. Our Senate sits down with the nominee and asks them questions, goes over their background, determines if they've got the qualifications to hold that position that they've been nominated for, determine if they've got the ethics or the aptitude to be able to handle what comes with that profession or with that job title. And it's always been my understanding that that's what's supposed to happen. And I've never been really into politics. So that limited understanding that this was basically just a job interview and the nominee is sitting in front of all of the bosses being asked questions by all of them, that's my generalized understanding of what this is supposed to be. And over the last several years, like I know a lot of others have, I've gotten at least a little more interested in paying attention to what's going on in politics. And I will tell you, I'm not left or right. I don't lean one way or lean the other way. I'm not hard left or hard right. Um, quite honestly, I think that that's kind of a crappy stance to take, to be one side or the other side. And I don't mean that to say that you need to be a fence jumper and go back and forth and, um, flip your opinions on things based off of what one party says or the other party says or whatever. What I mean is I don't believe you should be so attached to a party that you let it guide your decisions. And unfortunately, like so many others, I think that's exactly what's happened. And it's not anything new. It's happened long before now. There's always been talk of partisan decisions and bias and things like that. However, it really kind of hit me in the face yesterday because I was listening to some of the Senate confirmation hearings on Pam Bondi. Pam's supposed to be the U.S. Attorney General. I think that's the uh, job she was nominated for. She's been Attorney General down in Florida for a long time. She's got a long history. Don't really know much about her. Just know that she was the nominee, so I was listening in to hear how the confirmation hearings go. And she was obviously chosen by Donald Trump to fill that role. So the Republican nominated duly elected president or president elect chose her to fill that role, which meant, obviously, because we have partisan lines and people stick to those partisan lines, the Democrat side of the aisle was not going to be happy. And the partisan line was very heavily drawn in what I was listening to. And quite honestly, it was infuriating to listen to these questions that were being asked. And that's when the correlation between politics and mental health kind of come to me, because I'm sitting there and I'm listening to all of these senators ask these questions, and on the Democrat side of the aisle, they're all asking the exact same questions. Like, they're just different variations of it. And if any of you have ever taken a mental health test, a psychological test, if you've ever taken a psychological test for a job or anything like that, a lot of times one of the ones that's used is the MMPI or MMPI-2. I hadn't done research on that in quite a while. But one of the things they do during these psychological tests is, it's a lot of questions. I mean, it's a ton of questions that you have to answer. But one of the things that they do is that they will ask the same question repeatedly throughout the test in different spots and in different ways. And the reason they do that is because they're trying to see if you're going to give a different answer, as if maybe you've got an answer prepared for a specific type of question. And rather than going off of your prepared answer, they want to get to the real answer, the one that's not prepared. So that's the reason for that in that testing, is to determine, whether or not you're telling the truth when you're answering the question. And that's what I heard yesterday. When I heard these Democrat senators interviewing Pam Bondi, that's what I heard. They all wanted to keep talking about January 6th. They all wanted to talk about if President Trump or President-elect Trump ordered her to go after his political rivals, if she would do that. Like, I get asking those questions. Okay, I get it. If I was a part of a party that for the last 4 years at least we're constantly going after a man who wanted to become president and then he became elected, I too would probably have a concern about that. And that's not to say whether or not there was any validity into the investigations or the prosecution attempts or anything like that. I'm not giving credit one way or the other on that. But if I repeatedly went after somebody and all of a sudden they were now in a position where the tide could be turned the other way, valid or not, I'd probably be a little concerned about what was going to be happening. So, okay, those are valid questions. I got irritated with them being asked, or them asking the question, will you classify January 6th as an insurrection? What does that matter? It's 2025. That happened 4 years ago. People are still sitting in jail. They've still been charged. And they're waiting for the court dates. Maybe some have taken pleas. I don't know. But that happened 4 years ago. Why does that matter? Why does it matter if Pam Bondi, who's going to be, or is possibly going to be, the next Attorney General, why does it matter if she's willing to call January 6th an insurrection or a riot or a political uprising, whatever you want to label it? Why was it so important for them to harp on that? And then they brought up the question on whether or not she agreed with others saying you should let those arrested during January 6th out. She had her answers for that. I guess I could kind of see that. I can see the question being asked once, maybe twice. But why does every senator need to do that? Why does every senator need to bring up January 6th? Why does every senator need to bring up, are you going to go after political rivals? There was even one senator, and I don't remember which senator it was, but there was one senator who asked her if she was willing to say that Donald Trump lost that election, the 2020 election, 2019-2020 election. Why does that matter? Why does it matter whether or not the potential Attorney General is willing to say that Donald Trump lost an election 4 years ago? Why is that important? It's 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Why does it even matter? And these senators just kept browbeating her over and over and over again with these same questions. And then they would bring up things that she said. I understood that part. Yeah. During this year, during this time, during that time, you said X, Y, and Z. Would you care to give an explanation on it? Do you still feel the same way now that you did then? Those questions make sense. But then the continued harping on it. Then on top of that, they would ask questions. And then while she's trying to give an answer, because she didn't start out with whatever answer they wanted to hear, they'd immediately cut her off. Immediately start talking over the top of her. That's a tactic that's used in courtrooms. I've witnessed it. I've experienced it. I've experienced it during depositions. You get asked a question, and then the next thing you know, the person that's asking the questions is stepping all over you and not giving you a chance to answer because you're not giving them the response they wanted. And that's entirely what it is. I don't care if they want to classify it as anything else. You're not giving them the answer that they wanted. Ergo, they're going to continue to talk over you. And even when she would answer, she would say, okay, well, that's a non-answer. So it doesn't matter what she says. It literally doesn't matter what she says. And this isn't to say that I support Pam Bondi, because again, I'm not supporting or not supporting her. Just wanted the information because, unlike so many others, I don't sit staunchly on one side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle. I follow my conscience on decisions. I follow my conscience on things that are being brought to me. When I get asked my opinion on abortion, my opinion on this, my opinion on that, I follow my conscience on those things. I could give a crap less what one political party says over another. I don't care. And while I'm sitting there listening to this, don't take this as me browbeating Democrats, because that's not it. Because what I heard from the Republican side was grandstanding. They're not asking her any questions. No real questions. They're asking her softball questions that they already know the answers to. And I get it. She was nominated by Donald Trump, who won the Republican ticket and is the president-elect. Give her the softball questions. Let's get her through and not give her a chance to say anything that can mess it up. I don't agree with that. They took the time to grandstand and give these long speeches while asking softball questions, and you don't gain anything from that. This thing's being broadcast for the American citizens to see. It's for us to be educated on it as well. What am I learning from you asking softball questions? What am I learning about my potential next attorney general if you're going to grandstand and want to browbeat the Democrats, which some of the browbeating I was okay with because they were browbeating them over the crap that I'm talking about now. They were browbeating them over asking the same questions or not letting her answer. I was okay with them bringing that up. I'm okay with them pointing out that fact. But don't follow that stuff up with softball questions that doesn't allow you to learn anything about the nominee. If you're not learning anything about the nominee, then how do you know whether that person is actually fit to fill that role? How do you know that person is going to sit in that role? And talking in terms of the attorney general, how do you know that she's going to sit there and ethically handle these cases that come before her? Make the right decisions based off of those cases. If you're not asking the questions for it, you're asking her pre-prompted questions that you already know the answer to because it falls on the party line, and you don't learn anything. It's like no one did their research into what she did up until that point. They didn't go and do research to find out how she handled certain cases. And if they did, it may have been one or two questions, but I didn't get to listen to the whole thing, nor would I have listened to the whole thing. Because it was that bad. It was that horrible to listen to because it was so staunchly drawn between partisan lines. The Democrats that I heard, all they wanted to do was browbeat. All they wanted to do was try to demean her. And you're not learning anything from that. You're not learning anything from browbeating and demeaning an individual who's there to interview for a job. You know, she had some responses that I thought were very appropriate. One of the senators started trying to ask her questions, and she said, "Senator, I wish you would have taken the opportunity to speak with me earlier this week or last week, but you refused to speak to me." Now, do I 100% agree with them all sitting down and having conversations leading up to that point? Maybe. I don't know. But she pointed out, look, a lot of the things that you're trying to talk about now, we could have already discussed. But no, the senator waited until it was broadcast on national media, broadcast across the airwaves for the radio and TV, and then wanted to browbeat her and demean her for no other purpose other than partisan lines. Because not a single Democrat that was going along, at least during the time frame that I could listen to, not a single one was willing to sit there and ask an honest question. They all got a script, and it was worded differently. At least that's how it came off. It was worded differently, and as soon as you start to answer, that's a non-answer. That's a non-answer. Oh, you're refusing to answer. Here's a hypothetical situation. I'm not going to comment on a hypothetical situation. I don't disagree with that. Commenting on a hypothetical situation can open up a lot of bad doors. But she didn't want to answer those. That's a non-answer. That's a non-answer. You know, in particular, one of the topics talking about going after political rivals, I distinctly remember hearing Donald Trump during an interview, I think it was, where he said he wasn't interested in going after his political rivals. He was interested in fixing what he thought was broke. But I guess we'll just ignore that. We'll ignore that. Just like all the other times when he was asked so many questions and gave answers to those questions, but then they want to turn around and browbeat him and say he's never answered those questions. Or they want to accuse him of something, and despite all of the evidence that says otherwise, well, we'll pick and choose what we want to believe. Again, I'm not saying I support him or don't support him. I'm just saying you're not treating people the same. The Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, the one that was doing the Senate confirmation hearing on Monday, Peter something. I think it's Peter. They were not prepared to actually ask him any real questions. Elizabeth Warren come in and said something about him being a general, and he had to tell her, ma'am, I'm not a general. What? Why? Why even bring that question up if you're not going to do the research to find out what the man's actual rank is? But that's the crap that I'm talking about. And the reason why I drew this connection to mental health with all this is I noticed how it made me feel. You know, the repetitive questions that were exactly the same, just worded differently, reminded me of the MMPI test. The way that they were drawing partisan lines so hard made me think back to all the content creators and news media that I've heard where they talk about how these people are drawing political lines or partisan lines, how they're making sure that they stay on board and in line with the partisan agenda. And yet, here we are as American citizens sitting back, and these are the people that represent us. These are the ones that we're supposed to sit there and listen to and trust that they're guiding our country in the right way and they're representing our best interests. For those that are old enough to remember the last 10 to 12 years, think about how much trust you have in our government anymore. I'm not trying to draw an agenda or anything like that, because I want to support my government. I want to trust that my government is doing what's best for this country. But I don't have a problem saying that the faith that I have in my government is weaker now than it was 10 or 12 years ago. Because instead of our politicians going up and representing their constituents, instead of them going up and making decisions that's going to be best for this country, instead of that, what we see is them going up there and pushing partisan agendas. We see them going up there and making decisions that don't have Americans in mind at all. They claim it does, but it's all about one agenda or another. Think about all the different things over the last 10 to 12 years that the American people have had shoved down their throat and been told that you have to accept this as normal. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. I'm not going into specifics on this stuff, but think about it. The last 10 or 12 years, our government has come to the American people and said, your opinions are irrelevant. This is what is right. This is what will be done. Last time I checked, politicians were put in office by our votes. If you're one of those people that didn't show up to the polls, I don't even want to hear it. And I'm sure I'm not going to, it doesn't make a difference what my vote is, blah, blah, blah. Maybe not. Okay, let's give some credence to your theory that your vote doesn't actually count. You don't even try. You don't even give way to the thought that maybe you're wrong. Maybe your vote actually does matter. Because I'm willing to sit back and give way to the thought that while I think my vote matters, I'm willing to give way to the thought that maybe it doesn't. But you know what? I'd rather try and it mean nothing than do nothing and it would have meant everything. So I don't want to hear the statements of, my vote don't count, that's why I don't go to the polls and vote. Okay. Then don't have an opinion about what happens in this country. If you do have an opinion, don't bother sharing it with the rest of us. Because you're not going to put in the effort like the rest of us to try to make a difference. Don't want to hear it. I literally don't want to have a conversation with you. Now, if you're willing to be open-minded and have a conversation, that's a different story. But being closed-minded, nah. I'm not. I don't have time left in my life to do that. I don't have the time nor the interest left in my life to entertain somebody who's willing to be a stone wall on something. It's pointless. Happened with some coworkers the other day. We were having a conversation. One of them made it abundantly clear that they were not open to any form of interpretation of what they felt or thought about something. I walked away from the conversation. Walked away from it because why would I continue to sit there and engage in a conversation with someone who's not willing to be open-minded that maybe, just maybe, they're not right? I'm willing to sit there and do that. I know I don't know everything. You know how hard it is for me to talk about politics? Because I'm not politically smart. I don't study enough of it to know enough about it. I'm an average guy out here trying to earn a living for my life, or for my family, and provide for us. And in some small effort, trying to make society better. Trying to do my part to help someone out. That's what I know. But yet, that's not what we get in return. So, this whole thing of partisan lines and towing the party agenda, I see what state that our country is in. And I can only think that one of the reasons why we've got so many of the problems that we've got is that exact reason. Again, I'm not siding with the Republicans. I'm not siding with the Democrats, because both are equally guilty at towing the party line. Both are equally guilty of not wanting to work with the other for the betterment of this country. Because that's not what the Republicans want. And that's not what the Democrats want. So we're not going to work with it. We're going to shut the government down. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Meanwhile, while they're being career politicians, those of us out here and working to earn money and take care of this country, who are actually doing the physical work. We don't have a voice. At least that's how it feels. Instead, what we wind up getting is a bunch of people talking out the sides of their mouth. We get a lot of politicians that want to wait until there's a camera in front of them and they want to say the right things. I'm doing this for my constituents. I'm doing this for the X number of thousand people in my district back home. I'm doing this for America. I'm doing this for blah. Are you? Are you? I don't think so. Not anymore, at least. I'm not saying every politician. I'm not saying everybody in D.C. Far more than should be. You know, I listened to part of the Senate confirmation hearing for, like I said, I think he was it's the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. I don't remember which one it is. Peter something. One of the things they brought up, I'm guessing at some point he had an extramarital affair, had something going on in his life that morally is unacceptable. I was glad to see at least one senator speak up and point out the fact that he's a human and he's not perfect. I was glad to see this one senator say that he also was not perfect. Because during these hearings, and we saw it during one of the Supreme Court judges' confirmation hearings, we saw it then. They wanted to attack this person morally, ethically. And I get, bring it up. You're going for one of these top tier positions, and Americans are expected to trust you and believe in you, that you're doing the right thing. Question it. But that's not what happened. They didn't say, hey, we know you had a moment in your life where you made this unethical decision, this immoral decision. What's changed now from then? That's a perfect opportunity for that individual, that nominee, to give a response to show how they've grown and changed, how they used the forgiveness they were given and made the necessary changes in their life, how they overcome whatever it was. Yet, those senators will sit up there and they'll point fingers and browbeat, demean these individuals as if they themselves are imperfect or are perfect, when they're far from it. Go on any of the social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Start searching politicians caught driving drunk, politicians having affairs, politicians doing this, politicians doing that. The same exact things that they're pointing fingers at these nominees and waving their finger and shaming them on national television, national radio. The same thing that they're shaming them for, those individuals are equally guilty of. Yet they were elected. They're holding their chair. Oh no, not us. This glass house that we live in is perfect, when it's anything but. It's sickening. It's sickening to see how these individuals are. It's sickening to see how they treat other people. And then we're supposed to sit here and listen to them and think that they're making the best decisions for us. Because we know they make mistakes. They're human beings just like the rest of us. There's nothing special about them. They have a job title. They were elected into a position. They make a ton more money than most of us. But there's nothing special about them. They're human beings just like the rest of us. They wake up, eat breakfast, go to work, maybe, come home, eat dinner, go to bed, just like the rest of us. Just like the rest of us. And yet, they sit there and act as if they don't make mistakes. They sit there and act as if they're perfect and that the rest of us should just bow down and be thankful for what they give us. I don't get it. I don't get how you could sit up there and shake your finger at people. Quite honestly, if I was ever asked, not that I would, but if I was ever asked to sit in one of those positions, there's no way I'd do it. I can't say that I would ever want to do that job. I'm willing to answer for the mistakes I've made in my life. But what I'm not willing to do is be humiliated and shamed for everyone to see by people who are equally as flawed as I am. Not willing to do it. It's not worth it. It's a paycheck. I'll get out here and break my back doing something else. Because I'm not going to be judged by people who are flawed like that. Who are willing to sit there and sit on these committees and these boards and know the direction our country's about to go and then start trading stocks that's going to benefit them. We're talking about unethical. If I'm not mistaken, Martha Stewart went to prison for it. It wasn't for very long. She went to prison for insider trading. Guess our politicians expect us not to see that. Good on them for making money. Once you lift some regulations so the rest of us could maybe make some money the same way, since it's okay for you. But it won't happen. Won't happen. They knew these decisions are coming, but they're going to sit there and do it anyway. Don't believe me? Do your research. Do some research on the politicians that are sitting here trading stocks based off of decisions they know that are coming out of the Senate, that are coming out of our government. Again, I don't care that they got money. There's plenty of people around me that have money. I don't mean, oh, well, we pay our bills. I'm talking about people that go, you're looking at buying a car wrong because you're looking at a monthly payment as opposed to just looking at the total price. Those are people that I consider got money. Because when I'm going to buy a car, I'm trying to get the monthly payment to where I can afford it. People that got money don't do that. People that are smart with money don't do that. I'm not them. So I got plenty of people with money around me. It doesn't bother me. But let's wave our finger and shame others for doing the exact same thing. You know, I've got a rule in my job, and it's a personal rule for myself. I will never take action against someone for something I'm going to do myself or that I will do myself. I'm not going to do it. I'm running radar. If somebody's running over the posted speed limit and I know that I am guilty of running over the posted speed limit to that level, guess what? I'm not writing them a ticket for it. It's a little hypocritical. It's hypocritical. I'm not going to do it. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's got to look at me in the mirror. I got to be happy with what I'm doing. But that's not what we're getting from up there. That's not what we're getting from our politicians. What we're getting from them is I don't even know the right words to put it. The holier than thou, the mightier, the better. Again, it's both sides of the aisle. This isn't partisan here. It is both sides of the aisle. Republicans and Democrats alike do the same thing. And I know how it's affected me over the last 10 to 12 years. And I like to think I'm a pretty rational, reasonable person. But not everybody's like me. And when I sit there and see what they're doing, and I know how it makes me feel, the emotion that it draws out of me, I can only imagine what it's done to others. There's a reason why there are so many content creators that are getting millions of views because they're getting online and bashing our government. You'll even hear the Republicans talk about it. There's a reason why Donald J. Trump was elected president again, because the American people were tired. Maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe they just thought he was a better candidate. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not making a claim one way or the other about Donald Trump. But what I will say is I can't stand to sit there and listen to him do an interview. Can't stand to listen to him do an interview. I can't stand it because I get tired of all the, it's the best thing ever. It's the best thing that's ever been made. No, it's not. This is the greatest. Everyone, I've got everyone telling me they love it. No, you don't. No, you don't. Stop it. Just say what it is and be good with it. You don't got to add all the extra stuff. If you have to sit here and describe it, it's the greatest thing since the greatest things were great. If you got to sit there and tell me that, I'm not going to believe you. I'm going to think that you're full of it and you're blowing smoke up my butt and you're trying to get me to also believe that the greatest things are greater since the greatest things have been great. So don't think for a second that my comments have anything to do with I'm supporting one side or the other. They're all flawed. And our government has gotten to the point that I wonder how much support they actually have from those that aren't sitting there drawing partisan lines. How much support do they actually still have from the regular Americans who don't care what the Republican Party thinks, or don't care what the Democrat Party thinks? All they care about is how much groceries are going to cost, how much gas is going to cost, how much taxes are going to come out of their paycheck. Do they even care if they still have that support? I know they do during elections. But do they even care if they've got that support during the time between? Because you don't see it until it comes time for an election, at least out of many. You know, in getting ready to try to make this recording, I was trying to do some research. Like I said, I'm not politically smart. There's a lot of things about politics that I don't know. So I was trying to do my research on it. So I didn't get on here and sound just like a blubbering idiot on talking about politics. I don't think I did very good at not sounding like an idiot, but either way. And while I'm sitting there doing this research, I did go over to AI to run a couple of statistics and some other things by it. And one of the things that it said is, would you like to discuss ways to make a difference? I got ADHD, guys. It was real easy to go off down that little rabbit hole and start looking at that. And it's, work locally. That's where you're going to make changes at. I want to agree with that. But the federal government came in not too long ago and said that concerned parents were domestic terrorists. What? This small town USA or whatever city it was, they were disagreeing with the Board of Education, and concerned parents are being labeled something by our federal government. I'm sorry. I thought we had the right to be concerned over what our children were being taught. Thought we had the right to have an opinion on how our children were raised. Not in that situation. And I'll admit, there may be some nuances there that I don't know. There may be some nuances there that are just above my knowledge, and all I got was the propaganda partisan feed. It's possible. But I know that in any case where the federal government's deciding that they need to interject in a small town's or any town's Board of Education, that's a stretch, guys. That's a stretch. I thought states had the right to make decisions for what's best for their state. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm sitting here looking at the suggestion that AI is making for how to make a difference, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not. Talk to your representative. Start locally. It needs to be a systemic change. I agree it needs to be a systemic change. I also think that maybe the citizens need to stop worrying about what party somebody's in when they're taking their votes, when they're casting that vote. Stop listening to what people are saying during the election trail or on the election trail and watch what they're doing. I tell people all the time, words mean nothing. Actions mean everything. I can tell my wife that I love her every day, every hour. But unless I back that up with something, they're just empty words. If a politician is going to tell me that they love this country and they love the people that they represent, back it up. And if you don't put them in office. I know that's a pipe dream. But think for 1 second, I'm going to vote for somebody that I don't support. Just because they're a Republican doesn't mean I'm going to vote for them. Just because they're a Democrat doesn't mean I'm going to vote for them. I could care less about your political party. I care more about the content of your character and the things that you do to actually help people. And I'm not alone in this. I've seen far too many people and had far too many conversations to know I'm not alone in that. I don't think the federal government needs to be in everybody's house. I don't think the federal government needs to try to dictate how someone raises their children. I don't think the federal government needs to try to steal every dime they can from the American citizen. I should probably stop because now I'm starting to get off onto an area where I could get myself in trouble. We got a problem, guys. We've got a problem in our politics, and in my opinion, it is wholeheartedly affected the mental health of everyone in this country. Wholeheartedly believe that. Because you've got average citizens that aren't willing to have conversations with someone who is of a different political party, who sides with a different political party. How messed up is that? That's where we've gotten to in our country. That's where we have. Other than saying it at the polls when we vote, I don't know how to fix it either. So, yeah. I think that's about all the ranting I want to do on that. But if nothing else, it's food for thought. It's food for thought for anybody else. Because now I got to go back and figure out how I'm going to deal with it. I got to figure out where I can try to make a change. Got to figure out where I can try to start to make a difference so that maybe one day, maybe after my grandkids are dealing with it, maybe we'll get back to a time where our politicians actually want to represent the will of the people and not their own. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate y'all listening to me. Those of you that have sat here and listened to the live and interacted with me, those that aren't going to hear this until after it's post-production and put out, I appreciate you giving me your time. I appreciate the opportunity to vent, if you will, and I welcome your comments. I welcome your interaction. Know ahead of time if you choose to interact and you're trying to argue. I'm not going to argue. I'm willing to have a discussion, but I'm not going to argue. It's pointless. If everybody's screaming, then nobody's hearing what's being said. So I welcome it. I want the conversation. I want us to do better as a whole. I want us to do better as a country. Partisan sides aside, I want us to do better. Far too many people in this country that could use some real help for us to be fighting amongst ourselves. That's just my opinion. Thanks, guys. Bye.